Welcome to the Trance Movement podcast, where we will be exploring altered states of consciousness through somatic healing practices, embodied spirituality, and what all of that means for your personal path and life. Hi there, my name is Arnoud. In this episode, it's time to shed a little light into the dark. I've noticed throughout the years that when it comes to working with blindfolds, there are many questions people have, concerns and projections, but also a lot of curiosity as to how this works and why we do this. The blindfold is a very important tool in the work that we offer through Trance Movement International and the Academy. Not just in the live programs that we offer in the form of retreats and trainings, but even in the context of the online courses, for example, where you are offered a series of, let's say, guided meditations and exercises. Usually, at the beginning of each of these exercises, you are gently asked to close your eyes at the start of the journey. And what I would always recommend, if you can, to when you do one of these guided meditations or exercises, to not just close your eyes, but to put on a blindfold, which is not exactly the same thing. So let's first get into the, you could say, more obvious reasons, the ones that most people can imagine why using a blindfold can be such a powerful tool. And then to delve a little deeper into, you could say, the less obvious reasons, perhaps, but you could also say the more profound ones, why we at Trance Movement International, you could say, have working with darkness and working with blindfolds as one of our most basic tools. When you are asked at the start of any meditation or exercise to close your eyes, this also marks the beginning of turning inward, of embarking on an inner journey. Even if the exercise has anything to do with how you relate to the outside world, which it usually doesn't, then still, this marks the beginning of a journey where you stop perceiving things with your external senses and start perceiving things more from your internal senses. And so this is one of these more obvious reasons, right? To, at the start of such a journey inward, to close your eyes. But you see, there's something to say to take that step about going inward, closing your eyes, to take it a step further and to put on some form of a blindfold. Because when it comes to the quality of this embarking on a journey that towards the end of it you return back from, it's very powerful as a conscious act with your body and also as a conscious act and signal towards your body to put on willfully, actively, this blindfold. Actively taking away the distractions from the outside world, the visual distractions, for example, is another one of these basic purposes of using a blindfold. And there are many other reasons as well why this is so much more powerful than just simply closing your eyes. For example, during any transformative or healing journey, there will be moments when it's uncomfortable or maybe even confrontational. And in those moments, you might open your eyes. It's a reflex that you often even cannot suppress. And this opening of the eyes, just even for a fraction of a moment, is quite a disruption of the process that you're in. So again, this is one of these more, you could say, obvious reasons to put on a blindfold, because it truly marks the beginning and the end of a transformational or a healing inner journey. Then another one of these more obvious reasons to use a blindfold, and one I think that anybody can imagine, is that wearing a blindfold brings you more into a state of surrender, or maybe in a state of allowing. And I think this is even what blindfolds are usually used for in settings like in team workshops, in psychology. Everybody knows this in some way, right? That when you put on a blindfold, it brings you in a state of surrendering more because you just simply have to, right? You lose control, which is often, the purpose of the particular workshop, or at least losing control is often very, very beneficial, because many of our problems are related to ego being excessively in control of all kinds of stuff, or trying to be so. And so losing control, even just for a moment, can bring so much relief. And this is also usually the moment when something really opens up, when something finally can be released, when you let go of the control and allow yourself to finally sink into such a deep state of beingness, that from that state of a deeper presence, a deeper alignment, new clarity arises. New solutions, new ideas will start to rise to the surface, coming from this deeper clarity within. And this brings us to a maybe less obvious, but absolutely one of the more profound purposes of working with darkness and working with blindfolds, is that it's not only just a journey inward, but it's truly and profoundly a journey through darkness. And so, what does that mean on all kinds of different levels, right? On a practical level, for example, having on a blindfold works a lot better in taking out the light, bringing you into real darkness, than closing your eyes. And I also always recommend people, if they purchase or create a blindfold of some sorts that they use, to have something that's really, really dark, that's created of a material, a fabric, and in such a way that you are really brought completely into utter darkness. This might seem insignificant to some people, but it's not. I get this question a lot in my workshops, people asking me if they cannot just simply close their eyes instead of wearing a blindfold. But when it comes to closing your eyes, and you can try this out right now, for example, if you are in an environment where there is some external light, maybe a light source, or maybe you're outside, when you close your eyes, there's still a lot of light that passes through your eyelids. You can still see a lot of light. And so when it comes to bringing yourself in complete darkness, closing your eyes is not the same thing. And having a blindfold that truly, really takes out all of the light is of the essence. Then another aspect of truly making a journey through darkness, and looking at it from a more neurological and psychological perspective, or perhaps a shamanic perspective, you could say that this realm of darkness is where the subconscious resides. When waking consciousness and ego play out their lives in the light, you could say that the subconscious and the soul reside in darkness. This is the world of the imagination, the world of the dream. And so, again, this conscious act of putting on a blindfold is both the signal towards the body to make that journey, as well as the process of starting to sink into that body, into darkness. You see, your body is your subconscious. And by putting on a blindfold, you allow yourself to really drop into those layers of your beingness. And by doing so, bringing some awareness, some consciousness, some light into those realms, into those parts of you. Isn't this perhaps the purpose behind all of it, right? The growth in awareness, the evolution of consciousness. We people hide many things in the shadows. We hold many things in darkness. Most of our behaviors throughout our daily lives are driven by all kinds of subconscious or unconscious mental states, emotional states, beliefs, projections. And the first step, usually, towards any form of healing, transformation, growth, is to first and foremost become aware of all the stuff that's hiding in darkness. To overcome our fear for the dark and start relating to darkness as an ally, as a friend, as a teacher. In this sense, I truly feel, even in the creation of this recording, for example, to be some kind of an ambassador of darkness. As in healing circles and spiritual communities, most people seem to be all about the light. People are all light workers, and it's all about the light. There's not so much attention for the power and the value of darkness, which is actually kind of odd, because darkness is a true, real part of our existence. This is just something that nature really shows us, right? For me, nature is always a very important guiding principle, not just nature as a thing that you can take a walk in, but things natural, right? The natural way of things, human nature, right? And in the natural way of things, simply because of the way that our planet makes this dance around the sun and how it revolves around its own axis, half of the time, approximately, of our existence is spent in the light, and half of it is spent in darkness. I know we are extremely focused on the light as a species, as a culture, and we often forget about this other part of our existence, right? Not just our daily surroundings, but also that other aspect of our psyche, of our beingness. That's a very shamanic perspective. Not to really at this point get into shamanism, shamanic practices, or things shamanic. We have material content online, online courses, or other content specifically about that. So, what is shamanism? What makes something shamanic? What are shamanic practices? How can you incorporate those into your daily life? And one of the typical aspects of shamanic practices being that it connects you to things natural, the natural way, human nature. So again, this is not the moment to really get into all of that, but simply to acknowledge that this is human nature. And therefore, it's really worthwhile to, just once in a while, make that journey into darkness. And to, after going through darkness, emerge back into the light with new insight, new clarity, new inspiration. All right, so bringing all of this back to the beginning, where I've mentioned that, whether you are participating in one of our programs, one of our retreats or trainings, or doing some of those guided meditations and exercises, or even when you are just about to do any kind of deeper meditation, inner work, I would always recommend, why not try doing it with a blindfold? You will see that it will profoundly deepen your experience and infuse your growth with clarity and inspiration. And then this brings us finally to a more practical part of it. Um, for example, speaking about safety first. So, always when you are about to use a blindfold, keep safety in mind. Make sure that before you start the practice and for the full duration of it, that you cannot hurt yourself, that you set it up in such a way and in such a space that you cannot hurt yourself and cannot potentially hurt somebody else. Use your common sense. Of course, when it comes to working with groups, and especially if people are really moving or dancing, this becomes much more of a thing to take care of. And so in our facilitator trainings, this is a big topic that we get into. But when you're using your blindfolds privately, in your own personal meditations, for example, it's just simply important to, make a safe space for yourself. If you happen to move in your meditation, that you cannot bump into stuff. So create some form of a sacred and safe space for yourself. And when it comes to emotional safety, mental safety, it might be important to check, if your space has some privacy. While you are being blindfolded, it's good to know that nobody else can just enter your space or disturb you in some way. So those might be things that you want to take care of. When it comes to the practical choice of the blindfold, I always recommend, and I know from experience that it's really worthwhile, to invest in your blindfold, especially if you will be using it on a regular basis in your meditations. One of the options would be to buy something, a great investment in your growth. And in that way, there's a huge variety available, especially in the market of sleeping masks. And again, because it's really worthwhile to invest in something really good, it's good to keep in mind, first of all, that the particular mask or blindfold really takes out the light, that it's created from a good, high quality material, and that it's comfortable to wear. And one of these options that you can find nowadays in these sleeping masks and types of mindfolds and blindfolds are these versions where you have some sort of a hollow dark space around your eyes, like for example a cup or a hollow space behind a mask that they created where you can still keep your eyes open while remaining in complete darkness. These often, in my experience, work the best because there's a difference, as you can notice when you start experimenting with your blindfold. There's a difference between having the experience with your eyes opened or with your eyes closed. And it's really worthwhile to try this out and see what's the difference. And then my final recommendation would be, if you can, to craft your own blindfold and create your own special kind of shamanic journeying mask. To create this tool for transformation with your own hands. You can imagine that even with just having a piece of cloth as a blindfold, that you might draw or paint some patterns or colors on it. You can allow your own creativity to really flow and connect your spiritual path, your spiritual growth to your own craftsmanship, treating it as a sacred tool and keeping it at a special place, where at some point you know, having this as a ritual tool, that as soon as you take it and put it on, that you step into this realm. That's the power of that aspect of the shamanic costume, and that's the power of the blindfold. And so the more awareness and attention and care you put into it, the more powerful of a tool it will become. All right, so this has been kind of an elaboration on the how and why we use blindfolds in much of our work, many of our programs, and in the process has also become kind of an ode to darkness. Perhaps you found some inspiration here, and perhaps this is your moment to consider investing in a blindfold and to take that step to buy or craft one of your own. And to, at least give it a chance, try it out, and see the difference in your meditations, in your journeys, in your practices, to see what happens when you truly surrender and step into darkness. Thanks for listening, and please consider to like, subscribe, to follow for future content.